Hey everyone! ChatGPTaylor aka Taylor here. Welcome back to the channel. This video will serve as the part 2 of my boot order prediction for Season 4 of Disventure Camp. If you haven't seen part 1 of my boot order prediction, make sure to check out that video first before watching this video. I'll link the video at the top right corner for easy access. But if you've already watched that video, then welcome back, and get ready to see my predictions for the second half of Season 4. And with that, let's get started. Moving on to 10th place, we have Hannah. Although I do have a plan for Hannah's story, I feel like once Benji leaves, Hannah will probably end up as a supporting character, and we know from Season 3 that support characters probably won't make it far. So how does this happen strategically? Well, right now, the two alliances from the previous ceremonies are even at 5 campers apiece. That being said, the all-female group really isn't that unified, considering that Amelie was a swing vote while Anastasia and Linda were once trying to get each other out. This lack of unity gives the other group a chance to step in and try to get the numbers in their favor. While Jade and Isabel tried to rope Amelie into an alliance on the basis of gaining control of the game, Spencer and Diego tried to talk to Ivy and Hannah. The reasoning being that since Spencer was previously voted out for not being able to socialize well, Diego would push Spencer to actually try and make amends with people he previously wronged, which would be Ivy and Hannah, since he voted out Ivy's closest ally and Hannah on previous occasions. Meanwhile, Logan tries to reach out to Anastasia, who is nearly inconsolable due to Marissa's elimination, but she rebuffs him, not wanting to listen to him. Ultimately, Amelie agrees to flip sides and joins the more unified alliance, hoping that Jade and Isabel would be able to save her. Meanwhile, the remaining 4 outsiders are left stuck and undecided about what to do. Knowing that they are at the mercy of the other alliance, I think Linda, Ivy, and Hannah stick together and vote for Jade, and I'll explain why later on. As for Anastasia, I think she still votes for Isabel due to her current emotional state. This leaves this majority of 6 with a decision for who they should target among the other 4 campers. Spencer pitches to target Anastasia or Linda for being more vocal and aggressive, while Jade pitches to target Ivy or Hannah so that Linda and Anastasia will be left in the game to cause more drama and potentially target each other. And in the end, Jade gets her way and gets the majority alliance to vote for Hannah, seeing her as overly social and more willing to target them due to her previous elimination. But how does this make sense from a narrative standpoint? Well, based on her audition tape, we know that she'll probably lean more towards a social game than a strategic game. And based on episode 1, I get the impression that she wants to keep the peace as much as possible, considering how she was able to be nice to Amelie even after they had a brief disagreement earlier in the episode. But once she's voted out and then Benji is voted out upon her return to the game, Hannah falls back into more of a support character role, wanting to pick people up and encourage them so that the team has less drama on it. Perhaps she gives Linda some motivation and assurance that her kids would be proud of what she's accomplished in the game. Maybe after Tristan is voted out, Hannah helps Ivy realize that this is her opportunity to truly prove that she can win the game on her own merit, which is what she's wanted to do from the start. But after Marissa's elimination, Hannah realizes that being kind and trying to keep the peace hasn't put her in a position to win, and that in order to win, she needs to be more active. Remember when I said that I would explain why Hannah, Linda, and Ivy would vote for Jade? Perhaps Hannah is the one that tries to plant seeds of doubt in Spencer and Diego's heads that Jade and Isabel won't be loyal to him, and that's her version of being more active and less peaceful. Maybe her epiphany makes her go to Ivy and convince her that she needs to take her game into her own hands. But regardless of what happens, she's still voted out by a vote of 6 to 3 to 1, and she leaves knowing that being kind and trying to stay peaceful didn't help her game. And you never know, this could set up an arc for a future season where she tries to stir the pot at all times and it causes her to get voted out early. That might be cool. For the next boot, and also our 9th place finisher, I'm pitching it to be Isabel. This will be a big elimination since I suspect that Isabel could be one of the main antagonists this season. Now, how does this make sense strategically? Well, with Hannah gone, the majority alliance now has a 6 to 3 advantage. However, building off of what was set up in the previous episode, Jade and Isabel talked to Amelie to create a plan to side with Linda and Ivy and vote out Anastasia next. This move would give them the majority needed to take out Logan, Spencer, and Diego next, and then the 3 of them can dump Linda and Ivy afterwards, bringing the 3 of them into the finale. Amelie is impressed and agrees to the plan. They approach Linda and Ivy with the plan, and they have differing reactions. While Linda is excited, knowing that it's her ticket to getting back in control of the game, Ivy is hesitant, knowing that she just voted for Isabel and Jade at previous ceremonies. Seeing some hesitation, Isabel would step up and assure Ivy that all is forgiven, saying that just because she went against them, it doesn't mean they have to go against her. She compares this situation to herself, saying that just because she's a nun, it doesn't mean that she can't be a bit devious in order to win the game. This comparison makes Ivy realize that Isabel is just as two-faced as the people from Hollywood that she hates, and that now is the time for her to step up and make things right. So while the strategic coalition bands together to vote for Anastasia, Ivy goes to the remaining 4 campers and tries to convince them to vote for Isabel. Ivy also tells them about Jade and Isabel's plan to take out the men once Anastasia is gone. While Anastasia readily agrees due to her disdain for Isabel, and Logan agrees due to his desire to get Anastasia to trust him after she rebuffed him in the previous episode, Diego and Spencer are on the fence, wondering if Ivy is trying to trick them into betraying their alliance using acting, due to her background as a performer. But in the end, Diego and Spencer follow Ivy's move and cast the deciding votes against Isabel, sending her home by a vote of 5-4. This shocks Isabel and her new allies, who realize that they need to regroup if they want any hope of winning. But how does this make sense from a narrative standpoint? Well, based on what we've seen so far, I genuinely feel like we're going to get a bit of an antagonistic story arc from Isabel, which is something that I hope wouldn't happen when the cast was revealed. But if we are going down this path, then this is how I see it going. At first, she's going to put forward the image of her being a pure-hearted person who wouldn't hurt a fly. And once she switches sides and votes out Anastasia before the team swap, she pretends afterwards that she was manipulated instead of consciously deciding to betray her allies. But eventually, she would have to show her true colors as a two-faced player, which she does when she betrays her closest ally Natalia before the merge and when she tries to convince Ivy that she has no hard feelings towards her. This story arc would be very similar to Big Brother competitor Dan Gissling, who was also very religious on his first season and vowed to go to confession after the season. The only difference is that while Dan would have a lot of success on the show, Isabel would be eliminated in 9th, forcing her to reflect on whether or not she made the right choices, both in the game and as a person. Now we move on to our 8th place finisher. This one might seem a bit confusing, but I'm predicting Linda to finish 8th. Narratively, I think this is a decent spot to end Linda's story. As we know from episode 1, Linda wanted to show the world that she's more than a mom who takes care of her family. She starts the season with control of her team and exerts this control by taking out Ted and Anastasia. And once the team swap happens, she continues her dominance by orchestrating the eliminations of Benji, Tristan, and Richard. But once the merge begins, it all falls apart when she's caught at the wrong end of 3 straight elimination ceremonies. This string of failed efforts causes Linda to lose hope in her abilities and makes her worry that people will think less of her because of this. This reaction elicits 2 different reactions from her allies. Since Amelie has experience as a tough, results-based owner of a successful company, she plans to use a tough love style of motivation to try and get better results from Linda. But before she can do that, Jade steps up and tells Linda that she's already accomplished so much and that she should be proud of herself. Maybe Jade compares Linda to her own mother, who Jade said showed her the heights that she could achieve back in her audition tape. Not only does this make Linda realize that she has made people proud, but it shows Amelie that Jade is a good leader and that being an aggressive leader isn't always the solution, which can help set up future events. But how does Linda's elimination happen from a strategic standpoint? Well, now that there's a new alliance of 5, they essentially have control of the game and can vote out whoever they want. For argument's sake, let's say that the campers not in the main alliance vote for Anastasia since that's what they did at the last elimination. As for the majority alliance, they debate for a while, but they ultimately settle on Linda. And the reason why centers around Logan and his actions from the previous episodes. As a refresher, at the final 10, he tried talking to Anastasia, but she rebuffed him. And at the final 9, he eagerly agreed to vote for Isabel in hopes that Anastasia would trust him, now that he's helped her eliminate her biggest enemy. So here at the final 8, he continues trying to help Anastasia by pushing to target Linda, who led the charge to originally eliminate Anastasia in the pre-merge. After the alliance agrees to this, Anastasia pulls Logan aside and asks him why he wants her to trust him so much. At first, Anastasia suggests that Logan doesn't think highly of her and thinks she needs his help, which she is offended by. But Logan corrects her, declaring that he wanted to align with her after seeing how sad she was after losing Marissa. Logan then goes on to explain how sad he felt after losing Richard, and that even though she was the one who took out Richard, he didn't want her to feel hopeless like he did. Maybe Logan makes a reference to his swimming career and how devastated he was when his parents didn't approve. He would compare losing the support of his parents to Anastasia losing the support of someone she clearly loved, and how no one should have to go through that kind of thing on their own. This makes Anastasia look at Logan in a better light, and it makes her more receptive to talking with him down the road. But with that out of the way, let's get back to the elimination. Clearly, it's 3 votes for Anastasia and 5 votes for Linda. So where's the suspense? The elimination would be boring if there was no suspense. Well, if the trio outside the majority alliance sees the heartfelt conversation between Anastasia and Logan, they could pitch to Spencer and Diego that Anastasia might pull Logan away from them, which would lessen their numbers. Spencer and Diego would consider the trio's pitch, but ultimately decide to stick with their current group, while not necessarily closing the door on working with the outsiders in the future. But to add even more suspense, we can have Jade consider whether or not she should play her immunity totem that she got earlier in the game, and whether or not she should play it for herself or for one of her allies. For completion's sake, let's say that she doesn't play the totem and thinks that Diego and Spencer will vote with her. But in the end, the vote is still 5-3, and Linda is voted out. Now we move on to 7th place. With the way I've structured this story so far, I have Ivy being voted out here. Narratively, I think this makes some sense. As we know from episode 1, Ivy went into the season wanting to prove that she could achieve something without having her parents help her. And considering that she managed to flip the game on its head and control the past 2 elimination ceremonies, I think that's something to be proud of. Maybe we can add in that she wins the final 9 and final 8 immunity challenges for extra credit. But if you ask me, the Disventure Camp community has never been fond of winners who didn't need to win. For example, back in season 3, one point that the community used to explain why they didn't want Jake, Connor, and Rhea to win the season was that they already had money. Jake got money from Miriam, Connor owned a business, and Rhea was a movie star. And this season, since Ivy grew up with rich parents and is already a successful performer, some people might argue that she doesn't need the grand prize as much as everyone else. And honestly, if she goes from being a kind social player to then being relegated to a follower after losing her closest allies, before rising up and taking control of 2 eliminations, I think that's enough to satisfy her desire to earn something for herself. Now, how does this happen strategically? Well, it doesn't start out with Ivy as the target. At the start, Jade and Amelie are still on the outs, and to some degree, they still have a foot in the door with Spencer and Diego. Continuing their conversations from the previous elimination, they pitch the idea to vote out Anastasia so that Logan and Anastasia can be broken up. However, these negotiations are ruined when Anastasia goes on to win immunity in this episode. Maybe there's this big scene where Anastasia and Logan are the final 2 in the challenge, and Anastasia orders Logan to try and win. Logan complies with this request, and Anastasia ends up winning the challenge on her own merit, making her feel proud. However, with Anastasia immune, this forces Jade and Amelie to pivot and target Ivy. Perhaps they pitch that Ivy has such a great story since she controlled the final 9 elimination and won 2 immunity challenges up to this point. Meanwhile, Anastasia, Logan, and Ivy decide to stick with their majority alliance and target Jade since they see her as a bigger strategic threat than Amelie. This leaves Diego and Spencer in the middle, and they have to decide whether or not they should risk alienating Logan by taking out Ivy. In the end, Spencer rationalizes that if they get rid of Jade, then a trio could form between Anastasia, Logan, and Ivy, which outnumbers him and Diego. Therefore, it's safer to join Jade and Amelie in voting for Ivy so that the final 6 consists of 3 different duos. This results in a 4-3 vote that sends Ivy home. Ivy is upset, but she can at least be happy that she was able to make some big moves on her own accord. Moving on to 6th place, I'm going to put Diego in this placement. Truthfully, the only reason why I have him making it this far is because of the strong implication that he and Spencer will have a strong bond, possibly even a romantic relationship. But narratively, there's a way to close out his story here. Based on a confessional from episode 1, I feel like Diego's main story arc will revolve around him feeling like he needs to be helpful. So, he'll start the game trying to be a provider for his team. But once Spencer is voted out after the team swap, he'll experience a large amount of regret, which allows Jade to take over his strategic duties. But once Spencer returns, Diego vows to help Spencer for the rest of the game, up to a point where Spencer assures him that while he appreciates the help, it's not the end of the world if he can't help him. Perhaps that's something that they can bond over. With Diego's desire to always be helpful and Spencer's desire to always be academically proficient, perhaps together they can learn that results aren't always what matters in the end. But back to the elimination. Well, I think to set the scene, we need Diego to win immunity. Now you might think, wait, how can Diego be eliminated if he wins immunity? I'll get to that later. After that, we have 3 clear duos in the game. Jade and Amelie, Spencer and Diego, and lastly, Anastasia and Logan. With these duos set up, I think this is where Jade starts trying to plant more seeds of doubt to try and pin the duos against each other. Maybe Jade tells Logan and Anastasia that Diego and Spencer pitched voting out Anastasia had she not won immunity at the final 7. Maybe Jade reiterates to Diego and Spencer that Logan and Anastasia are getting too close. Sure, it's villainous, but Jade did say in her audition tape that she noticed how badly previous contestants tried to be liked, so I suspect that she'll be willing to be a bit devious to win the game. The key thing here is the effect that Jade's manipulation will have on every duo. For Spencer and Diego, I don't think they'll buy into the manipulation, but I do think that they will vote for Anastasia. This is because Spencer will realize that if Anastasia is gone, he can pull Logan back with him and Diego to form a majority to take out Jade and Amelie at the final 5. However, Jade is smart enough to know that this is what Spencer wants, which causes her and Amelie to target Spencer. This is because in Jade's mind, if Spencer is gone, Diego is alone, so Jade can then convince Diego to take out Logan and Anastasia at the final 5, which she would feel confident in doing since she basically controlled Diego after Spencer was voted out the first time. And since Jade expressed in her audition tape that she is confident in her approach, Jade would feel confident that she successfully manipulated Anastasia and Logan into voting for Diego as well, which would mitigate any concern of a tie. That being said, while Anastasia might buy into the paranoia due to Diego and Spencer voting against Ivy at the previous ceremony, Logan wouldn't buy into it, and he pleads with Anastasia to trust him and take out Jade instead. However, Anastasia doesn't budge, siding with Jade and Amelie to target Spencer. Now with this setup, it seems like Spencer is going home. But this is the kicker. Hoping to remain somewhat loyal, Logan tells Diego that Jade and Amelie want Spencer out, which makes Diego panic. And although Diego tries to warn Spencer, he brushes it off, believing that it logically doesn't make sense for Jade and Amelie to target him since they need the numbers to take out Anastasia. With this resistance, Diego decides that he has no choice but to give up his immunity to Spencer, which forces Jade, Amelie, and Anastasia to pivot and vote for Diego instead, sending him home. With this dramatic series of events, Diego leaves knowing that he did one last thing to help the man he loves, while Spencer recognizes that Diego was right all along and that he needs to realize that emotion will cause people to make non-optimal moves, which he needs to take into account going forward. Now we're at the final 5. With this setup, I think it makes sense for Amelie to be eliminated here. Narratively, there's a way to wrap up her story arc by this point. At the beginning of this video, I predicted that Amelie would be voted out for being too overbearing. But since returning to the game, Amelie would learn that taking a step back, taking a gentler approach, and letting others take the lead isn't always a bad idea. One example of this includes Amelie flipping to join Jade and Isabel at the final 10, where she trusted them to keep her safe, which ended up working out for her. Another example is when Linda broke down at the final 8, and Amelie watched as Jade successfully coaxed Linda into recognizing her true worth rather than aggressively demanding that Linda get over her insecurities. Overall, working with Jade and letting her take the lead on strategy would show Amelie that she should have faith in other people and not be as aggressive, as long as the people she's working with are competent. Now, how does Amelie's elimination make sense from a strategic standpoint? Well, let's set the stage by saying that Spencer wins his first individual immunity challenge, fueled by the emotions surrounding Diego's sacrifice. Due to Spencer being immune and still emotionally upset from Diego being blindsided, Jade and Amelie realize that their best bet of staying in the game is to convince Anastasia to vote for Logan. Meanwhile, Logan and Spencer agree that they need to work together to take out Jade, who has been the mastermind of the last couple of elimination ceremonies. This leaves Anastasia as the swing vote, and she's caught in a dilemma between her loyalty to Logan and her worries about Logan working with Spencer due to Spencer voting for her at the last ceremony. But here's where something a little bit crazy comes into play. Jade stated in her audition tape that she's confident in her approach for the game. And after successfully pulling off 2 blindsides, there's a chance that Jade's confidence is through the roof. Due to this, I'm pitching a scenario where Jade actually shows Anastasia her immunity totem, telling her that it doesn't matter if Logan and Spencer vote for her, because she'll cancel their votes anyway. And if you think this is unrealistic, this exact scene happened in a season of Survivor, and Disventure Camp loves pulling references from Survivor, so it's possible for this scene to occur. This reveal would put Anastasia in an interesting position. Because as of now, Logan and Spencer are planning on voting for Jade. But if Jade is going to play her totem on herself, then Anastasia could warn Logan and Spencer about Jade's totem, prompting them to switch their votes to Amelie instead. The suspense for this ceremony is centered around Anastasia's decision and whether or not she trusts Logan to stick with her over Spencer at the Final 4 ceremony. And after some suspense on Anastasia's decision, she ultimately decides to warn Spencer and Logan and joins them in switching their votes to Amelie. So when Jade ends up playing her totem, it ends up being for naught as Amelie is voted out by a vote of 3-2. Sorry Amelie, but you did well considering you were originally voted out second. Now for the coveted 4th place position. Who will barely miss out on a spot in the finale? This one took some thinking, but after looking at who I had left, I think it makes sense for Spencer to be eliminated here. Narratively, I think Spencer is just about done. His whole story arc would be about going from overly logical and strategic to being more sociable and actually considering the impact of people's emotions on their decision making. Physically, him winning the Final 5 immunity challenge can serve as a good bookend for his desire to do well in all aspects of the show. And in this episode, he'll finally get a chance to show that he understands the impact of emotions on other people. Now, how does this elimination make sense? Well, to set the scene, I think Jade needs to win immunity again. It might be plot armor for the main antagonist of the season to have immunity at the Final 4, but it's not like we've never seen it before, so let's say that happens again. With Jade immune, Anastasia decides to put her full faith in Logan by voting for Spencer. I think Jade would join her, believing that Spencer is the only one who can match her on an intellectual level, so getting rid of him gives her a better chance to win a puzzle-based challenge in the finale. As for Spencer, he votes for Anastasia, hoping that Logan will join him. However, in Spencer's speech to Logan, he acknowledges how close Logan and Anastasia have been over the past few episodes, and that he doesn't want to put Logan in an uncomfortable position, even though he would like to stay. This sudden show of emotion and social awareness makes Logan question whether or not it's morally right to take out Spencer, since he does seem to genuinely care about him as much as Anastasia does. This builds at least some suspense going into the ceremony, and I think depending on how much drama you want in the finale, you could do this in two ways. You could either take the peaceful route and have Logan vote for Spencer to send him home directly, or if you want to take the dramatic route, you could have him vote for Anastasia to force a 2-2 tiebreaker out of respect for Spencer, which Anastasia wins. I could see Odd Nation cartoons going with the latter route, so that's the route we'll take. Logan forces a tie, Anastasia angrily wins the tiebreaker, and Spencer goes home, leaving a lingering conflict between Logan and Anastasia to be set up for the finale. Now we have our final three. Assuming that we get another two-part finale, who will be eliminated at the end of part 1 and take third place? Well, this one might be a shock to some of you, but I'm putting Jade in third place. Now you might ask, why would Jade get third place? Doesn't it make sense to put Jade in the finale so that it sets up another hero versus villain finale? Normally, I would agree. But the past 3 seasons of Disventure Camp have already featured this dynamic, and I'm not convinced that Odd Nation Cartoons wants to go back to the concept of the hero defeating the villain in the final moments, like we saw with Miriam defeating Fiori and James defeating Rhea. And since we had Rhea defeating Jake in Season 3's finale, I doubt we're getting another villain winner. So, I think it's more likely that Anastasia and Logan patch up their relationship in part 1 of the finale, before they both go on to qualify for the final 2, giving us an intense friendship finale. Now, you might argue, friendship finales are so boring. There's no stakes. But I think this is a little bit different. It's not like Anastasia and Logan started out as friends. They originally started out as enemies before slowly learning to work with each other and becoming friends, and I think that arc is something that Odd Nation Cartoons would love to explore. After all, Odd Nation Cartoons used the same arc for Jake and Ali back in Season 3, and according to Jared, one ending of Season 3 was going to have both Jake and Ali in the final 2, so I think it's very reasonable to predict that Odd Nation Cartoons would accept a friendship finale as the final 2, fueled by each camper's competitive nature. Anastasia wants to prove that she's not just a pretty face, and Logan wants to prove that his physicality is enough for him to achieve his dreams. Not a bad ending if you ask me. But of course, this means that Jade loses the final challenge and gets third place. It's not what Jade wants, but I don't think this is a horrible ending to Jade's story in this season. Jade wanted to play the game in an evolutionary way while being fueled by her ambition and confidence in her own skills. And even though she ended up as an antagonist, I think her actions in this version of the season fulfilled everything she wanted to do in the game. And in my opinion, this would be a good example of an antagonist who isn't an outright horrible person. It's not like she's almost killing people like Rhea. Jade is just a person who isn't worried about being liked and is willing to do what she needs to do in order to win. She doesn't have to be over the top in order to be an antagonist. Being a bit manipulative and making clever moves should be more than enough to establish her as this season's main antagonist. And with Jade's elimination, we're down to our final 2 campers, bonded together by a story arc of going from enemies to friends. But only one can win the show. Who will it be? Well, if you saw my last prediction video, then you already know the answer. I think Anastasia will end up winning. But first, I want to wrap up Logan's story. I predict that Logan's story arc will mostly just feature him as a good-hearted guy that people don't mind having around. Kind of similar to Wayne from Total Drama. But I predict that Logan will be more than just a comic relief character or a supporting character. The bonds that he forms will be based on his own backstory and desires. For example, I predict that Logan and Richard will have a strong bond, and when Richard starts doubting whether or not his kids will be proud of him, Logan will assure Richard that his kids would be proud of him, comparing it to how he's proud of his teammates for trying their hardest, even if they don't win. Another example is with Anastasia. Even if the two of them don't get along at first, Logan still reaches out to Anastasia after Marissa's elimination, knowing how hard it can be to continue on without the support of people that you love, which he compares to how his parents allegedly aren't thrilled about him being a swimmer. This allows them to form a bond even deeper than the bonds formed from characters like Ashley, Tess, and Rosa Maria in previous seasons. Rather than just having Logan tell Anastasia that everything will be alright, he opens up to Anastasia and empathizes with her on a personal level, allowing for a mutual exchange of emotions and feelings rather than just one person comforting the other. And although Logan may not end up as a strategic powerhouse, I have a feeling that his big moves will be made with intent. If he ends up as a follower, it's a part of his mentality of being a team player in sports. And when he pushes to eliminate Isabel and Linda in order to gain Anastasia's trust, it's his understanding that actions speak louder than words, which connects him to his athletic background and the need to make actions in order to get results. That's what Logan's game will boil down to in my mind. Genuine kindness, forming strong bonds, and making deliberate moves to prove his loyalty. And last but not least, that leaves Anastasia as the winner of this season. I made this prediction in an earlier video, and as I stated there, I see Anastasia as the winner because she follows the trend of past Disventure Camp winners where they start off being a bit disliked, but they eventually learn and grow into the hero that people love. Based on her first confessional in the first episode, I suspect that she wants to prove to people, men in particular, that they shouldn't underestimate her and that she's stronger and smarter than they might assume her to be. However, this desire to prove herself as being strong and smart might end up being the reason she's targeted, which in this timeline, happens when Linda pulls off a blindside at the final 14. However, this doesn't quell Anastasia's fire, and when she returns to the game, she fights back even harder as she manages to rally her allies into taking out Spencer, before subsequently losing control of the game once Natalia is blindsided. Although this causes Marisa to reach out to Anastasia to try and get her to tone down her gameplay, she insists that she has no choice, using her experience in the modeling industry to support her claim that people won't respect her or listen to her if she doesn't act this way. But once Marisa is voted out, Anastasia completely breaks down, knowing that her gameplay wasn't enough to save her closest ally. And after failing to take out Isabel at the final 10, she loses even more hope and she gets in her head even more. An example of this would be when Logan tries to reach out to her to console her, but she brushes him off, convinced that he views her as weak and that she needs someone to help her. But after Logan successfully helps orchestrate the eliminations of two of her biggest enemies, she becomes more open to talking to Logan. And once he explains his backstory and why he's reaching out, she realizes that Logan understands her situation and genuinely cares about making sure that she's okay. And to top it all off, she realizes that in the process of shooing away Logan's earlier attempts to talk and by assuming that he was just a jock who thought she was weak, she was doing the exact same thing that the people in the modeling industry were doing to her. They made incorrect assumptions about Anastasia based on her looks, and Anastasia ended up doing the same to Logan. This reflection and epiphany forever changes Anastasia's game, and now that she's level-headed once again, she's able to make the right decisions at the right times, such as keeping Logan safe during the final 5 and rebuilding her bond with Logan at the final 3, en route to winning it all at the end of the game. While her game might not end up being the strongest, her growth as a person and as a player is all that it takes for her to rise to the top as a true representative of what it means to be the winner of Disventure Camp. Phew. That was a long explanation. As a little recap, here's a chart of all of my predictions for each camper. Do I think I'll be correct? Honestly, no. I know that I'm going to get something wrong, and chances are that I'll be wrong about something big. After all, I thought that Rhea was going to be a pre-merge boot in Season 3, and she ended up winning the season. So for all I know, Anastasia could end up as the first boot and Ted could end up being the winner. I don't know how well this prediction will age. But I can assure you that I'll be tuning into the season to see how it goes. And I hope that all of you will tune in as well. And that about does it for this video. What did you think of the video? Do you agree with my predictions? Do you disagree? What's your boot order prediction for this season? Either way, please let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Thank you very much for watching. Click like if you like the video, click subscribe if you really like the video, and for some ending words of wisdom. Make sure to watch what you say, because the last thing that you want is to tell thousands of people around the world that you're all about giving good head. Thank you, and farewell.